Welcome, everybody, to Firehouse Talks with Jersey Rick, igniting leadership excellence. I'm Rick, and this is my co-host, Emily.
Hi.
How's everybody doing today? This is episode number 2, the Furnace of Leadership Development Reflection. But before we dig into that, I'll let everybody know, Emily and I, this is where we discuss everything related to leadership. And you do not have to be a firefighter to listen to this podcast. Because if you're tuning in and you're listening, you're going to learn some things about leadership and some tips
Yeah.
and hints about it as well. And Emily and I do take a biblical worldview on leadership. So, as I mentioned at the beginning here, today's episode is coming from the last chapter of my book, which is The Furnace of Leadership Development. And the title of that chapter is The Furnace of Leadership Development. And the subtitle is The Temperature Has to Be Just Right. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. But for those of you who are watching on YouTube, here's the book, the cover of the book. And my book is available on Amazon in both paperback. Well, actually, I say both, but the 3 versions: paperback, ebook,
Yeah.
and audiobook. And I will add that has been a 2-time international bestseller on Amazon. So that's the book, and we are going to talk about the last chapter.
Yeah. So let's just jump right on in. So we are here in the second full week of January
Yeah, wow.
2025. It's hard to believe.
Yeah, it is.
So, given that it's the new year, ask our listeners, are you the type of person who makes New Year's resolutions and then forgets all about them?
Yeah, may I interject real quick, Emily? I
Yeah.
just saw a statistic this morning that people who make New Year's resolutions, only 9% who make a New Year's resolution keep them. That means
Wow.
91% of the people don't keep their New Year's resolutions.
I believe it. I mean, I'm not really one to make New Year's
Nah,
resolutions
neither,
myself.
neither am I. Neither am I.
So, have you vowed to turn over a new leaf?
Yeah, that's usually what a I almost said revolution. That's all. That's usually what
Some people may need a
resolutions.
revolution
Yeah,
in
they
their
have,
life
yeah, they
too,
do
but
need a revolution in their life. Some people you need to turn some things around in your life. But that question that Emily asked, hey, have you vowed to turn over a new leaf? Well, what's a new leaf? I just had my book. A page is also referred to a new leaf.
Mhm.
From that standpoint, you could go from page 10 over to page 11, and you're going to get, new information. On the other side, you got a leaf out in your yard that fell off the tree. You flip it over. What do you got on the other side? Usually a dirty part of the leaf. Yeah. So, yeah, so there you have that.
Yeah. So ask yourselves, are you approaching 2025 from the standpoint of personal and professional development? And in a few moments, we're going to talk more about this,
Yeah,
what this looks
and
like.
yeah, and thank you, Emily. And in that last chapter, at the beginning, I quoted novelist Anthony Trollope when he said, quote, "There is no royal road to learning, no shortcut to the acquirement of any art,"
Mm.
unquote. Hey, folks, it takes effort. I know we live in the instantaneous generation, pop it in the microwave, hop on your iPhone, get information, ask Siri a question, so forth like that. But look at people who are involved in the arts, and it takes a while to learn. Someone who is a painter, and I'm not talking about some of this modern garbage. It looks like somebody just spilled a couple buckets of paint. Yeah, and they swirled it around, or, you know, up the street from us is a Northern Colorado Law Enforcement Training Center, and there's some type of, monstrosity, sculpture sitting out in front of it. And it doesn't, to me, it doesn't look anything that has to do with law enforcement at all. So, hey, from
In a weird way, it looks like a donut shape,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah,
recycled donut
yeah,
shape.
yeah. Actually, it does. And for those of our friends here in law enforcement that are listening, that's just a soft, funny jab that Emily is making at you there. But I think that the Visual Arts Commission in the city of Loveland, Colorado, could have done a much better job
Yeah.
in picking something that truly reflected the profession of law enforcement, whether that was a statue of an officer with a canine dog, something along that lines, rather than this piece of metal crap that they got hanging out there. So hey, that's free, folks. You wouldn't have heard that if you hadn't tuned in here
Hmm.
in here today. So, a question I want to ask you is: are you content with being average? There's a lot of people that are content with being average, but how about you? Hey, in school, average is C. But it takes work to be an A student. And Emily, before we
Yeah.
came on, you were talking about math.
I chuckled at that because I worked really hard to try to be an A student in my math classes, especially algebra, but I was thrilled if I passed with an average C.
That was me. That was me too,
Mhm.
Emily. I
We
struggled
just
with
didn't get the
math,
math
folks.
gene.
Yeah, no, Emily and our other daughter, Rebecca, they did not get the math gene, and it certainly didn't come from me. But hey, I'm a product of the New Jersey public school system. So yeah, the math we learned is like, yeah, hey, the car down the street's got four tires on it, so that means it's got four hubcaps on it. So what if you take them four hubcaps? How much money are you going to get down at the pawn shop? Yeah, so and I'm kidding about that. I was not out there stealing hubcaps for you people who are saying, "Oh, no, look at that." No, that was a joke. 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 So, hey,
You being a Jersey wise guy.
yeah, I'm
Mhm.
being a Jersey wise guy. So I'm going off the assumption that if you're taking the time to listen to our podcast, most likely you are above average because it's a commitment. It's a commitment to listen to any type of a podcast. And so I would like to think that if you're listening to this, you're above average and you are devoted to personal and professional development.
Yeah. So before we go any further, let's talk about this Furnace of Leadership Development title. What does it mean, and how did it become the title of a chapter and the book?
Yeah, what does it mean? When I began writing the book, the title did not come first. And I
Yeah.
had a fantastic writing coach out of Denver. Her name is Alexandra O'Connell, originally from New Jersey as well. And Alexandra was great, yeah, in coaching me and encouraging me. And then also Susie Schaefer, who's now with Finish the Book Publishing. Both Alexandra and Susie said, worry about the title of the book later on, Rick. Just start writing, get chapters out there. So as I moved on in this process of writing the book, I ultimately did settle on the Furnace of Leadership Development. And that came out of the fact that the part of New Jersey that I grew up in, southern New Jersey, at one time, the glass industry was huge. It was really, really big down there. And in Millville, New Jersey, was Wheaton Glass. Now, my great great grandfather was one of the original employees at Wheaton Glass. And T.C. Wheaton was the founder. He had been a pharmacist and he needed bottles for his products. So instead of buying them himself, he said, why don't I make my own? And that's when he opened up his glass factory. But back, it was probably sometime in the mid 60s, Wheaton created what was then called Wheaton Village. Now it's called the Wheaton Arts Center, but I always refer to it as Wheaton Village. And there's a replica of the original glass furnace that's in there. And we love when we go back there and visit is to just sit and watch the glass artists. And many
Yeah, it's
times
really cool.
they're just, yeah, it is cool. They're making beautiful, glassware, glass works. And we've watched them make paperweights over the years. I can't remember the precise year. It was probably sometime around the mid 90s when my wife, Emily's mom, she had purchased one of the glass paperweights from Wheaton. And it's a beautiful, beautiful paperweight. I describe it in the book, and it has a flower in the center. Well, that flower came from hours and hours and hours of work and training. So that particular glass artist knew how to create that. So looking at just solely the paperweight, that furnace is running at approximately 2,400 degrees Fahrenheit up to 2,600 degrees Fahrenheit. So the glass blower or the artist will go in and gather up the glass, and they will come sit down on a large bench, and they will roll the metal pipe back and forth while they're shaping it with either a wood block that was soaked in water, or many of them will use wads of newspaper that have been soaked in water. And so they'll work that and shape that. And then it gets to a certain point that they got to go back to the furnace and warm it up some more, bring it back, work on it, take it back to the furnace, warm it up. They'll take it out, and they will go over to the mold, and they will hold the pipe vertically and then dip or press that hot glass into the mold to pick up other glass. That's where the flour comes from.
It's
Then they
quite the
will go,
process.
yeah, in the process. And then they will go back, gather up some more glass, come back and work it, going back and forth and back and forth. So the furnace of leadership development comes from that process, because if that glass paperweight is left in the furnace too long, well, it melts and it's going to fall off. If it's out for too long and it gets cold, that paperweight can shatter. Now, the last time that we were at Wheaton Village, Emily and my wife and I, we watched the two gentlemen making a beautiful bowl.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, this was a very long process that they were going through. And just towards the end, the the bowl shattered into hundreds of pieces.
It was so sad.
Yeah, it was.
Worked so hard.
But the guy who was doing the main part of the work, his attitude was, well, okay, start over again. So from that leadership development perspective, that temperature has to be just right for leadership development. If it's too hot, we're putting too much heat on somebody, we're going to melt them. On the other hand, if we're not doing enough to develop people, they get cold. They get cold and they become indifferent. And so that's why the title of the book, The Furnace of Leadership Development, and then also that last chapter in my book. That's why that name is there. So Emily, do you have any input or thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's kind of like we touched on, it's really an art
Mhm.
to be developing personally and to develop others.
Yes.
And patience is a huge part of it as well. You just don't
Yes.
wake up developed, and you don't just overnight turn someone into a development, either like develop them or their character.
You're right. Right. Hey, and solid leaders, Emily mentioned character. Solid leaders are leaders of character. There's a lot of people out there that are in supervisory positions, and I will not call them leaders. A lot of them are fulfilling roles and are in various government functions, whether it's local all the way up to federal. And they are not leaders. The last episode, we talked about the difference between leaders and managers, or
Yeah.
leaders, work with people. Managers is about systems and processes and resources, things of that nature.
Yeah.
Right there. But yeah, it's what Emily said is 100% true. Leadership development, personal development is not a one-time thing. And you can't run down to the store and buy the leadership pill, which one of my blogs here in December of 2024 was called Liquid Leadership. And it's sort of a tongue-in-cheek jab at some of the people out there who think that leadership development is easy or they don't need it. So I encourage you, hey, go to my website. The link is in the show notes, and it will be in December of 2024, and you will see that leadership in a bottle. So Emily, what else are we going to talk about here today?
Yeah, so we're talking about personal and professional development. So are they truly separate? And how does one impact the other?
When we are doing leadership development, I believe that is not separate from personal development.
Mm-hmm.
There are technical aspects of professional development. For instance, the 30 years that, or 37 years, excuse me, that I spent as a firefighter, there were technical aspects of the job that I worked on, whether it was pulling hose multiple times, throwing ladders, technical rescue, hazardous materials while in firefighting. There's some of those technical aspects that there are certain principles that you can learn that can apply to personal development. But even in those hands-on drills or those classes, when we did a drill, that's where you would see somebody's character come out. So there was a little bit of a connection there between the professional and the personal development. But overall, there's very little separation between the two of them.
Mhm.
And certainly when we are developing personally, and I will include that leadership aspect. Now, some people, you could say, well, leadership development is professional development. Yes. And it's also personal development. Yes. So, what the example I just gave shows how they impact one, let me try that again, shows how they are impacting each other.
Mm.
We talked about communication in
Yeah,
our first episode. Last year, we talked about communication. We could have went out and trained until the cows came home. But if we did not have the ability to communicate with each other, effectively communicate with each other, then that training is really boils down to like beating your head
nothing.
up against the wall. Yeah, nothing.
Yeah.
So both of them, personal professional development, are very closely linked to each other, and they do impact each other.
Yeah. So the first step stepping into 2025 is reflecting back on last year of 2024. So, are you reflecting on this past year before flying into 2025? I know it's really easy that a new year begins, you either have these new year resolutions or you have all your calendars already filling up and you're just hitting the ground running. It's the whole after the holiday season. But are you really taking that time to reflect? And you're probably wondering, like, why should you even bother to take the time and mule over the year? So let's dig into that.
Yeah, listen, it is important to reflect. Now, we don't want to go through life looking in the rearview mirror. If you're looking in the rearview mirror in your pickup
Yeah.
truck or your car, you're going to crash that thing. We would conduct after action reviews in the fire service. Military doesn't, law enforcement doesn't. And it's a good thing for us to do it as well. But it's a good thing to go back and reflect over the year to see, what you have done. In John Maxwell's book, The 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth, he writes about the law of reflection and states, quote, there are some kinds of growth that come to us only if we are willing to stop, pause, and allow the lesson to catch up with us, unquote. And Maxwell has also, people talk about, well, I got experience. Well, I like what Maxwell also says with this, and he talks about evaluated experience.
Mm.
That really is the separator. And so that's why we need to go back and we can reflect. We've got 12 months under our belt from 2024, and we can go back and you can pause, take a breath. What are we learning from our experiences? Is it just experience and we don't learn anything from it? And Emily, unfortunately, I believe the majority of the people who are walking around this planet do not learn from their experiences.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
And with like that topic of like not looking back at the rearview mirror, something I heard is that we only go back to our past to learn from,
Mhm.
just to gain information
Yeah.
from it and
Mhm.
learn from it. Don't stay stuck in it. Just go to just quickly
Yes.
gather
Uh-huh.
information.
Yeah.
So the other questions are you pouring your life into others?
That's a good one.
And are you enjoying time spent with loved ones and friends?
Yeah, that's a good and hey, be honest with yourself. Don't do things out of obligation. We had a conversation with an individual
Yeah.
not too long ago, around their family events, and it sounds like most of them just do it out of an obligation. They're check marking the box, because mom and dad want them to do it. They're just controlling their lives. So, do you enjoy, that time? So, quickly as we wrap up this episode, here's some tips for reflecting in the past year. And if I go over those too quickly, you can go back 30 seconds and listen. Or hey, you can go to Amazon and buy my book and you'll have it in writing. But write a list of what worked and what did not work. Ask yourself the question, what was the reason behind why it worked or why it didn't. Hey, create a list of people you impacted last year.
Mm.
Might be, surprisingly long. If it's not, you should ask yourself what's keeping you from impacting other people. That could be a biggie. Go back through your phone, look at pictures. It's a good way to remind yourself. Ask yourself, hey, what seminars, conferences, classes did you attend in 2024? And I'm a biggie on reading. And listen, men, I know a lot of guys do not like to read. So I'm not going to read your book, Davis. Hey, you can get it in audio. You can get a lot of other books in audio
Yeah.
as well. Leaders are readers.
Yeah. Find what works for you.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So why should we bother with all of that with the list that you just mentioned?
All of that I had just mentioned is what we're going to talk about in our next episode when we move into developing your goals or what you would like to accomplish in 2025. Unless we reflect back, how can we move forward? So that's why all of that matters. And it's a thermometer and a gauge as well. It shows us where we are at.
Yeah.
So, anything else, Emily, to add as we wrap this one up?
No, I don't think so.
Okie dokie. Well, that's it for this episode, folks. We've talked about reflecting on 2024. And as I just mentioned in episode 3, we're going to talk about building on this reflection and moving into 2025. So, if you've liked this episode, please go and like it and subscribe. And you'll see in the show notes is my website. Please go there, check it out. You'll see a link to my blog, and you also see the services that I have to offer. So thank you for tuning into this episode of Firehouse Talks with Jersey Rick, Igniting Leadership Excellence. I'm Rick. We'll see you later.
We'll see you next time.
Hey, thank you for tuning in, folks. Bye bye.
Bye.